Communication is the exchange of information between any two or more parties, through any means or medium. It has been part of man since the beginning of its existence. Even the parts of our bodies communicate with one another. Communication does not exist only among humans, other animals too have their ways of communicating, whether by barking, roaring, or howling.
Study shows that other than humans, prairie dogs may have the most advanced vocal communication system in the animal kingdom. These are herbivorous ground rodents found mostly in the grasslands of North America. They got the name, prairie dogs, due to their alert calls, which is identical to a dog's bark. The prairie dogs are colonial animals that use their strong voices to communicate with other members of the colony. They have different sounds for different activities. For example, they may communicate displeasure by making a squeak sound. The same sound may be used by a mother to call her offspring. When facing a threat, they usually alarm other members by releasing a bark sound such as this.
Throughout the history of mankind, humans have communicated through many different ways, such as wood carvings, smoke signals, etc. But in this video, I'm going to narrate the major incidents that changed the way we humans communicate forever. The three major ways humans communicate are by signs, writing and speech. While the use of symbols to communicate began about 30,000 years ago, the use of speech had begun far back around 100,000 BCE, and communication through signs such as hand gestures might have even existed since the beginning of mankind. The main problem we experienced in communication was not being able to communicate with someone that is far from our position, such as someone in another city or country. The invention of symbols helped solve this problem a bit, in that the information to be transmitted would be written in form of symbols in a surface such as rock. Then later, the rock would be sent to the person the information was intended for, either by a person or a bird. The use of birds to deliver messages is said to have likely began with ancient Egypt and Persians. Later, the method was adopted by the Romans, who used it extensively in wars. They used pigeons to convey messages ranging from matters relating to politics to the military. Julius Caesar is said to have made use of messenger pigeons when he conquered Gaul. The messenger birds mostly used at the time were the homing pigeons, and were normally called pigeon posts. These are domesticated pigeons that were trained or known to usually move from one particular location to another, during a specific period of time. The letter to be conveyed would be tied to the bird, which would then fly the message to its home, where the recipient would be waiting to receive it. They were sometimes called war pigeons if used at war. These messenger birds were widely used until the invention of the telegraph. They were even used in the two world wars. This method of transmitting information was important because it helped begin the technological advancement of communication. The first symbols were written in caves by painting. The oldest cave painting is said to be located at the Chauvet Cave, dating to around 30,000 BC. After about 20,000 years later, we moved from cave painting to carving on rocks known as petroglyphs. Since the invention of symbols, writing had evolved in many ways, from cave paintings to rock carvings, until 2500 BCE. Writing with ink was developed in 2500 BCE, around the same time in both China and Egypt. The ink used at the time was made with lampblack as its pigment. The pigment would be mixed with gum to make sure it glued to the surface it was used on, which was mostly the papyrus paper, made from the pith of the papyrus plant.
The earliest known writing is said to have originated in Mesopotamia, around 3400 BC in a place known as Sumer, located close to the Persian Gulf. With clay being readily available in the area, the Mesopotamians used damp clay to form tablets, which they wrote on by pressing a wedge-shaped stylus, made from reed, on it, which would form an imprint on the tablet. These imprints represent words. A stylus is a rod-like object that has a pointed end for writing and a blunt end for cleaning. After writing on the clay tablet, they would leave it outside to dry and harden. This method of pressing a wedge-shaped stylus on a surface to form symbols was known as cuneiform. The word cuneiform was derived from a Latin word, cuneus, meaning wedge. The cuneiform method of writing was largely used in Mesopotamia, until it was replaced by the alphabetic script, after 100 BCE. The use of clay tablet to write was widely used until 3000 BC, when it was replaced by the Egyptian papyrus, which became the longest-lasting writing material ever used in history.
However, the papyrus paper had some problems, such as it was fragile and was prone to wet and dry conditions. Later, around 1st century BCE, another kind of writing material called parchment was beginning to replace the papyrus paper. The parchment was made from the split skin of sheep, with the wool side of the sheep's skin made into skiver, which was a strong but soft leather usually used to bind books. The flesh side was mainly used in making the parchment. Around this time, another type of ink was developed in China. This ink, originally from China, was developed from inks before it, and was called the India ink, due to its importation from India to Europe. The India ink was made from carbon and was good because it was very durable and therefore wasn't faded by light and chemicals, but it also had its flaws too. The India ink required absorbent paper, that is, paper that absorbs liquid easily, to be used. If it is used on a non-absorbent surface like the parchment, it would wear off. Due to this problem, another type of ink was produced in the 8th century. This ink was made using chemical precipitation and could be used on the parchment paper without wearing off quickly. Since the invention of writing, it had been done by hand, which was sometimes painful and had to be done carefully. But this all changed in the 15th century. Before the printing press was properly developed around 1436, the woodblock printing has existed since the 2nd century AD in China. This technique was used to print texts and images on printable surfaces, and involved carving wood into the shape of the image or text to be printed, rolling ink over the carved surface, and stamping or pressing the inked surface on the printing surface such as paper or parchment. We don't really know when and who invented the first printing press. However, it is said to have originated in China, where the oldest printed text known to man, dating back to the 1st millennium AD, was found. The Diamond Sutra is the oldest complete, printed book known to man. The book contains 7 pages of printed texts, which is glued into a roll about 5 meters in length. The book is said to be written initially in Sanskrit and Indian language around 2nd century CE, but was later translated to Chinese by the prolific translator, Kumarajiva, in 401 CE. It was printed using the woodblock method, on the 11th of May, 868, according to the Western calendar. Though the woodblock printing had existed about a century before the Diamond Sutra was printed, the book is the earliest printed complete surviving book known to man. The Chinese used to make paper from hemp or mulberry, which they would dye imperial yellow with the bark of the amur tree, which is mildly waterproof and repelled insects. They would first paint the text on a thin paper, which they would place on a wood block. The wood block would be cut according to the shape of the letters in the texts. After cutting the block, they would ink its cut surface, which would be stamped or pressed on the yellow paper. In the late 1430s, a man named Johann Gutenberg, who was from Germany, was running out of money, so he became desperate and started looking for ways to get it. One day, he was inspired by a trend that was going on in the days, where people would attach small mirrors to their dresses, either their cloth or hat, believing that these mirrors could absorb healing powers when they visited holy places. Gutenberg wasn't interested in the mirror itself, but was amazed at how profitable it was to make cheap products in large amounts. So from his past experience working at the mint, and his knowledge of the already widely used woodblock printing, he noticed that the printing process would be a lot faster if he could use blocks of wood already shaped into letters in a machine, and he would be able to make large amounts of printed texts in a short amount of time. But in his machine, Gutenberg used cut metals instead of wood to make the letters. He made his machine in such a way that the metal letters could be rearranged and moved around to create new words, hence the name, movable type machine. Gutenberg first used his machine to print a Bible, which is now very valuable due to its historical legacy. Over the years, the use of his machine would spread from Europe to the rest of the world. The Gutenberg machine is basically an oily-based inked group of reversed metal letters, which would be pressed on paper, in such a way that the text would appear normal in the printing surface due to the reversed metal letters used in the process. In those days, the printing press was operated by hand, but by the 19th century, it was powered by steam, and today, we have printing machines that are electronic, automatic and can print much faster than before. Johann Gutenberg did not invent printing. Printing, which is simply the art of stamping inks on a surface such as paper to make texts and images, had existed long before the time. Gutenberg's aim was to innovate printing to a mechanical movable type, so as to improve speed in production. Johann Gutenberg's invention changed the world forever, helping to spread information quicker throughout the world, which potentially resulted to its development.
Thanks for watching.